The Lumbee are the largest Native American tribe east of the Mississippi. 56,000 people, an entire nation, folded into the swamps and farm country of southeastern North Carolina. And for 137 years, the United States government refused to fully admit they existed. Not that they weren't a tribe, that they weren't quite real. Some said the Lumbee were the ghosts of the Lost Colony of Roanoke, the 117 English settlers who vanished off the North Carolina coast in 1587 and were never seen again. Others said that was a fairy tale, spun to make a mixed-race people acceptable. When historians and geneticists finally pieced together who the Lumbee actually are, the answer was stranger than either side wanted to hear, and the reason America denied them for over a century turned out to be the ugliest part of the story. To understand it, you have to go to a place most maps barely notice: Robeson County. Flat, wet, laced with blackwater swamps, and the slow brown coil of the Lumber River. For 300 years, this was a place people came to disappear, and a place a whole people managed to survive without anyone outside quite understanding how. Because here's the puzzle at the heart of the Lumbee. Most tribes can point to a treaty, a reservation, a single ancestral nation with a name. The Lumbee couldn't. No reservation, no treaty, no neat line back to one tribe. What they had was themselves. Thousands of families farming the same land for generations, speaking English, carrying Old English surnames, with faces that didn't fit the boxes America insisted everyone fit into. And that, it turned out, was enough to make them a mystery, or an excuse. Let's start with the story everyone wants to be true. In 1587, England planted a colony on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what's now North Carolina. 117 men, women, and children. Their governor, John White, sailed back to England for supplies. War delayed him 3 years. When he finally returned in 1590, the colony was gone. Empty. No bodies. No sign of a struggle. Just one word, carved into a wooden post: Croatoan, the name of a friendly island and the native people who lived there. The colonists had promised that if they ever left, they'd carve their destination, Croatoan. And then, for centuries, silence. Now jump forward 300 years. In the 1880s, a North Carolina legislator named Hamilton McMillan looked at the people of Robeson County and noticed something that stopped him cold: their surnames. Dozens of them matched names from the roster of the Lost Colony. They spoke an old, almost Elizabethan English, and they told their own stories of white people who had come among their ancestors long ago. McMillan became convinced. These, he argued, were the descendants of the Lost Colony, English settlers who had walked inland, joined the Croatan, and become something new. In 1885, North Carolina made it official, naming them the Croatan Indians. It's a beautiful story. It might even hold a thread of truth, but it isn't the whole answer, and the fact that it became the official one tells you something dark about the rules of that time. Because here's what the historians found when they dug past the romance. The strongest evidence doesn't point to Roanoke. It points to the rivers. A Smithsonian anthropologist named John Swanton concluded in 1933 that the Lumbee descended mainly from Siouan-speaking peoples, the Cheraw, the Kiowa, and their neighbors. A document from 1725 records these Siouan groups living right there, along the Lumber River. The earliest documented ancestors of the Lumbee weren't colonists. They were native nations that were already there. But even that isn't the full picture, and this is the part that makes the Lumbee extraordinary. In the 1600s and 1700s, the tribes of the Carolina coast were being shattered by disease, by war, by slavery. Whole nations were reduced to a handful of survivors: the Cheraw, the Tuscarora, the Waccamaw, coastal Algonquian bands. And those survivors did the only thing that could keep them alive. They came together, They gathered in the swamps of Robeson County, out of reach of the colonial powers, and they merged, many broken peoples becoming one new people. And yes, over generations, English settlers and free African Americans married in too. The Lumbee weren't the remnant of one tribe. They were the survival of many. A nation assembled out of the wreckage of the colonial frontier. When modern DNA testing looked at Lumbee families, that's exactly what it found. A genuine, layered mix of Native American, European, and African ancestry. Not a myth, a mosaic. And that mosaic is precisely what America used against them. Because in the Jim Crow South, a people who were native, but also part European, part African, with no reservation and no single tribe, that people broke the machine. The law needed everyone to be one thing. The Lumbee were, unmistakably, more than one thing. So the shipwreck story of the Lost Colony wasn't only romance. For a mixed people in a segregated state, claiming pure English colonial blood was a shield, a way to say, we are not what you are afraid we are. They fought, too. In the 1860s, a young Lumbee man named Henry Berry Lowry led an armed band against the Confederate Home Guard that had terrorized his people and executed his father and brother. For years, Lowry and his men outran the militias through swamps they knew better than anyone alive. To North Carolina, he was an outlaw. To the Lumbee, he was, and still is, a hero. Then, in 1872, he simply vanished. No one ever proved what became of him. The Lumbee survived every attempt to erase them, but surviving was never the same as being recognized. In 1956, Congress passed something called the Lumbee Act. On its face, it acknowledged them as Indian, but it carried a poison pill, a clause that specifically denied them the federal benefits and services every other recognized tribe received. Congress had found a way to call them Indian and give them nothing, recognized and denied, in the very same sentence. So the fight went on, and on. Since 1974, a bill to fully recognize the Lumbee passed the House of Representatives 9 separate times. 9 times, the Senate let it die. And then, after more than a century of being told no, something happened that almost no one saw coming. December 18, 2025. After 137 years, full federal recognition finally became law. The Lumbee became the 575th federally recognized tribe in the United States, the largest tribe east of the Mississippi, acknowledged at last as exactly what they had always known themselves to be. And here's the thing worth sitting with. The Lumbee never needed the DNA to tell them who they were. They knew. They had always known. In the surnames, in the swamps, in the stories passed down at kitchen tables for 300 years. The mystery was never about the Lumbee. It was about everyone else. A country that could look at 56,000 people who had survived everything and still demand they prove they deserved to exist. When the world tried to erase dozens of shattered nations, those nations refused and made themselves into one that could not be broken. The Lumbee were never lost. We just weren't looking. If somewhere in your own family there's a history that was buried, denied, or rewritten to fit someone else's rules, sit with that for a second. Because the Lumbee are proof of something worth remembering. A people can be told they do not exist for 137 years, and still, in the end, turn out to be the ones who were right.